Welcome to the Transformative Pursuit with Dr. Christopher Cohn. We're glad you have joined us and pray the content will be helpful and encouraging. The pursuit starts now.
Hello and welcome to the Transformative Pursuit. Today we're asking, transform to what? What's the goal? We talked last episode about the issue of authority and our basis for certainty in answering these kinds of questions. And you remember a rich young ruler came to Jesus asking him about what was good. And Jesus said to him, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There's only one who's good." He challenged that rich young ruler with the idea that if he's asking Jesus, he needs to be willing to trust what Jesus would have to say. Jesus is the source of authority. Jesus is able to explain what is good. And we see this throughout the whole transformative discussion in Scripture. Romans 12:1 tells us, as Paul writes, he says, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice." Now that is quite a contrast to the world system around us. The focus of caring so much for oneself that we are totally egocentric. That's the world system. Paul is telling us to present our bodies a living and holy sacrifice. It's acceptable to God, and it's our logical or reasonable service of worship. It's the expectation based on the mercies of God and what He's given to us. In verse 2, we get into the transformative concept. He says, "Do not be conformed to this world." So he warns believers not to be patterned after the world system, the culture around them, but instead to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good, acceptable, and perfect. And Paul has no problem talking about what's good and identifying what's good, because he goes back to God as the source, as the one who has authority to define good. This is a huge worldview statement and concept. And Paul works right through it. Once again, we're forced to choose between worldviews, right? And we discussed in another episode that every worldview on the planet is sending us in one direction, which is achieving fulfillment, goodness, godlikeness, self-actualization by our own efforts. All worldviews do that except for one, and that's the biblical model, biblical Christianity. Well, these other models are essentially building a stairway to heaven, challenging us to follow their recipe so that we can end up where there is good. But here's the problem. And we see it in some of these definitions, particularly of secular humanism. Let's check out secularhumanism.org as it defines secular humanism, and notice some basic terminology here. Secular humanism maintains that through a process of value inquiry informed by scientific and reflective thought, men and women can reach rough agreement concerning values, crafting ethical systems that deliver optimal results for human beings in a broad spectrum of circumstances. It's from secularhumanism.org. It's telling us how we achieve optimal results. Well, optimal is a synonym for best, right? You have degrees of good, better, and best. Well, the way to get the best result is by following secular humanism, according to this writer and secularhumanism.org. The challenge is there's no definition. There is nothing to tell us what is actually good. So let's keep reading through this. Secular humanists reject religious humanism's conviction that leaning on spiritual or transcendental moorings, even if lightly, is essential for the good life. In other words, if you follow the recipe of secular humanism, you can end up with the good life. Well, what is good? That's the question. What's the goal? You're telling me about how I can have the good life and how I can have optimal results. But what does that mean? And notice how in Romans 12:1 and 2, Paul has no problem discussing what it means. What's optimal? What's good? But we don't have any definitions here in this description of this entire worldview of secular humanism. Let's look at another statement. Secular humanism is invigorated by the best that atheism and religious humanism have to offer, thoroughly naturalistic, yet infused by an inspiring value system. Oh boy, now we get the lofty, inspiring language. We all want to be inspired. We all want to be excited and and have purpose and mission and vision. And we're infused here by an inspiring value system. But what is the value? What are the values? Again, we're stuck with that good, better, and best without any definition whatsoever. And that is a problem. Here's Phil Zuckerman in an article he writes in Psychology Today. What is secular humanism? A positive, ethical, non-religious orientation. Here's what he has to say. Secular humanism begins with denial or doubt concerning the existence of anything supernatural. So I'll just pause there. He's denying, recognizing secular humanism denies anything supernatural at all. It assumes only that within the natural realm. So he says denies or doubts anything supernatural, including God, but then goes well beyond that secular stance by positively affirming and valuing the potential of human beings to be kind, enact justice, solve problems, and make the world a better, safer, greener, and more humane place. Again, the word better, good, better, best. But what does good mean? What is better? What is best? We're not getting any definitions here. We're just presented with this stairway to heaven without any real identification of where we're going. Here's Zuckerman again. Secular humanists accept existential mystery as just that, existential mystery. We may never know why we are here, where it all comes from, how time and space can exist, or why anything ever exists at all. These things may be insoluble. I'll pause there for just a moment. When we're reading Paul, and he's telling us about what God has revealed, and we're reading Jesus, and Jesus is explaining how he's revealing the Father, and all these very significant truths, there's no particular mystery there. These things are being revealed. These great questions are being answered. But in secular humanism, these things may be insoluble. So rather than obsess over such conundrums, Zuckerman says, we focus on what we can know. The problem is we interpret what we know based on what we don't know and the possibilities of what we don't know. And this is very problematic. If we only know a tiny fraction of what we're engaging with and we make assumptions based on what we don't know, we could be going not only the wrong direction, but a destructive direction. So he says we focus on what we can know, how to be a good friend, how to ease the suffering of others, how to protect nature, how to safeguard human rights, and so forth. And of course, we could spend a lot of time discussing these various aspects. One thing that hits me is that idea of protecting nature. Well, if humanity is simply nature in a Darwinistic system, then how can we do anything unnatural? How can we actually harm nature? Isn't that what natural selection is about? We'll talk about that more as we go. But you see the problem here. The definitions aren't definitions. We're learning how to protect nature, but what does that mean and why should we do it? I'm not suggesting that we should be responsible with the environment around us. I'm just saying, give me some definition. Help me to understand here. And this is where we see the contrasts of worldviews. And I challenge you to kind of picture that two-way, one-way stop sign. That one-way sign that has an arrow going one direction, an arrow going another, and it's a one-way sign, and you have to choose. You have to go one or the other direction. Well, in the biblical model, it's a complete opposite approach. God is reaching down, providing life and fulfillment and meaning and purpose and definition of good, better, and best for us through his word. And this is what Paul is talking about. In Romans 8:29, he describes that we know God causes all things to work together for the good, for those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. These he foreknew, he also predestined, and here's the point, to be conformed to the image of his Son. That's the purpose. We're to be transformed into the image of his Son. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. Dig into the Word this week. Have some fun. Awesome things happen when you're in the Word. Enjoy the process. God bless you. We'll see you next time.